Number 10, Deadpool? Okay, so not really Deadpool, more like DC's parody version of Marvel's parody character. You know who I'm talking about, it's Red Tool. Red Tool is a mercenary who only fights with power tools, and while he doesn't appear to have regenerative powers, can definitely still take a beating. In fact, he even got beat himself up by Harley Quinn after having his phone number tattooed on her butt and arranging to surprise her for a wedding. People have always thought Harley and Deadpool would make a great match, which is where Red Tool and his sudden romantic inclination come in. Of course, for Harley, it would take more convincing than a surprise wedding. She beat Red Tool to the point that he was knocked unconscious, proving that in DC's opinion, Harley could make quick work of Marvel's Deadpool besides at least their parody of him. However, Harley did ultimately decide to team up with Red Tool after he came to and they were surrounded by the GCPD. Fortunately, his wedding present to Harley was the perfect ticket out of this predicament. I kind of love Red Tool and Harley Quinn together too. They're pretty cute. Also just like Red Tool in general with his little tool speech bubbles. Number 9, Manos. Manos is the wielder of the Infinity Rings. So yeah, you guessed it. He's a parody of Marvel's Thanos. But just because he's a parody doesn't mean he's not powerful. He still wields those super powerful rings and is super evil, leading to Power Girl to want to take him on when both she and Harley seek him out on their adventure together. While Manos is busy monologuing about just how epically he is going to destroy them both, Harley Quinn manages to steal the rings off his fingers without him noticing, and then accidentally kills him with the rings, to boot. She didn't know they were loaded, you know, so it's not really her fault there. Should this be possible? Probably not. Is it hilarious? You betcha. How did she even steal those rings without him noticing? That's what I want to know. Number 8, Lobo. In Injustice Gods Among Us, Harley Quinn is working some stuff out after Joker is gone and ends up stealing Lobo's flying motorcycle. This ends about as well as you could imagine, with Harley being chased all over by the crazy, overly violent parody of a tough 90s guy. Lobo having the power to regenerate and Harley Quinn being a normal human would mean you'd think that she'd never be able to beat him. But you'd be wrong. Armed with Lex Luthor's super strength and durability pills and her knowledge of psychology, Harley ends up convincing Black Canary and Green Arrow to team up with her and then makes quick work of her pursuer. And then of course, using her psychology, she's like, yeah, this isn't really about me, is it, Lobo? And Lobo's like, it's not, you're right. And before we move on to our next point, just a quick reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it and if you love Harley Quinn as much as I do. Number 7, Deathstroke. Of course, this one, like Lobo, was a bit of a team effort. In fact, even more of a team effort than Lobo's defeat, if I'm being honest. But still, Harley fought alongside the rest of the Suicide Squad to take down Deathstroke. And it worked, so I'm counting it. They ultimately were successful and Harley did help. So yeah. Deathstroke actually was also working with the squad but ended up betraying them. Together with Black Manta and a final shot from Deadshot, Harley took down Slade Wilson, which even with help is still pretty impressive considering how usually unstoppable and undefeatable Deathstroke is considered to be. Yeah, I feel like even if you get help in defeating Deathstroke, you're still doing pretty good. If you can do it. I couldn't do it with help. I don't know, maybe unless like Superman was helping me? Number 6, Ulysses Highwater. Ulysses was Hell's very own bounty hunter who pursued Harley after she managed to break out of her own personal circle of torment in the steamy underworld. I don't know why I called it a steamy underworld, because it's hell and it's not nice. I feel like steamy makes it sound a lot nicer than it actually is. She was back with her crew, the Quintets, and while Ulysses was a powerful demon who wielded guns and magic smoke and magic bullets, Harley found a way to outsmart him. I just love that this is more often than not Harley's tactic. In a typical psychologist play, she simply found a bounty that Highwater craved more and used it to manipulate him. He caught her, but she found a way to manipulate her tormentor, Petite, and then get back to Ulysses to offer him the bounty of his dreams so that she might escape his ire. Pretty brilliant, really. It didn't end up working out for Highwater, but in the end, it definitely worked out for Quinn. Number 5, Batman. At least this one feels like a sort of fair fight because both Batman and Harley Quinn are humans without any superpowers. But when it comes to skill sets and resources, Batman is definitely working with a lot more than Harley Quinn is. Still, somehow, there have been multiple occasions where Harley has bested Batman in both the animated universe and even in the comics, and much to the chagrin usually of the Joker, proving that while Joker may have been around for longer, Harley might somehow be an even greater criminal genius in some weird twist of fate. Of course, Batman also might try to convince you that he's only lost any fight to Harley because he wanted to, and that it was all part of his master plan. But then, what else is new? Isn't that usually Batman's go-to excuse in the face of defeat? I don't know how many comics I've read where Batman's like, oh, I meant to lose. It's all part of my master plan. Okay, Bruce. Of course, if you still feel like this is too, racy or is too dangerous, let us know, and we can always try to do something different. Number 4, Adolf. I mean, this one is just super surprising because Harley would need a time machine or something to even, get back in time to the leader of the German forces during World War II. Yeah? Or you might just need Superman's balls. No, not those balls. These balls. Harley managed to swipe these Kryptonian power orbs while she was in Superman's Fortress of Solitude. The green ones allow you to time travel, which sends Harley back in time to, well, an alternate timeline that basically looks a lot like DC's Bombshells, in this case. In fact, it pretty much is DC's Bombshells. Harley goes back there and surprisingly not only runs into and defeats Adolf, but manages to defeat a bunch of armed soldiers besides. It's all pretty impressive, actually. She also gets to kiss herself. Her bombshell self. Her bombshell self is gross.
Getting close to the end into number 3, Doomsday vs. Darkseid. After a battle in Metropolis, Superman attached Doomsday's body to an asteroid, which is freaking brutal, and then he flung that asteroid into space. However, the issue ended with a panel of the reawakened and laughing Doomsday, still chained to the asteroid but otherwise alive. After passing through a wormhole, Doomsday's asteroid was found by a deep space scavenger ship. Upon examination of the particularly looking drifting rock, the ship crew retrieved the object, hoping to find something of value. The scavenger vessel happened to be en route to Apocalypse, and you know what's gonna happen now. Darkseid has since been empowered by the fabled Omega Force after his first encounter with Doomsday, and oh yeah, they've already fought together at one point. But Doomsday was fully rested this time because, he was chained to a freaking asteroid, and after slaughtering the crew of the salvage ship, found himself landing on a harsh world. Unknown to Superman, Doomsday had faced off and beaten Darkseid in single combat, even after withstanding the full effect of Darkseid's Omega beams. And then he just laid waste to Apocalypse. And while the fight may have happened off screen, or I guess off page, it's pretty damn terrifying knowing that Doomsday just beat Darkseid just because he could.
Number 2, Thor and the Incredible Hulk. Thor Ragnarok is easily one of the best installments in the Infinity Saga. Taika Waititi is returning to the studio to do Thor Love and Thunder, and I can't wait. He's super funny. If you haven't seen What We Do in the Shadows, go watch it out. It's his best work, I'd say. And Jojo Rabbit. He makes good movies. So one of my favorite scenes from the movie is also one that makes fans pretty annoyed. Now this part in the movie had to happen so the plot can move a certain way, and we got to see a cool battle take place in the meantime, but it's also kind of unrealistic. So the Grandmaster's great champion, of course, ends up being Thor's friend from work, Hulk. Now he's been there for a while after Sokovia, so he's not the same green guy as they last saw. Thor spent most of the fight getting it handed to him. He was trying to talk to Bruce, trying to calm him down, give him little arm tickles. It wasn't working out. Until he tapped into his true powers and unleashed a good number of lightning bolts to the face. That ought to do it. So Thor is about to finish off Sakar's champion once and for all until the Grandmaster himself intervened. If only he had replaced that remote for 2 seconds, this movie would have gone a much different route. Maybe less fun, but probably more honest.
Number 1, the Trinity. Harley Quinn has not only managed to defeat all of those superheroes individually, but even managed to defeat them all together, what we refer to as the DC Holy Trinity of superheroes. In Heroes in Crisis, she manages to make quick work of them, using them against one another. She gets close enough to Diana, hugging her and confessing that she was not the one to blame for the tragedy at Sanctuary, so that she can get her hands on her lasso of truth. Haha. She then uses that to tie up Batman, threatening to break his neck with the lasso, while using it to question him. She asks him if he has anything on him that, could be used against Superman. And paranoid old Batman, he definitely does. He has a bit of kryptonite in his belt, he tells her. She takes that and uses it to defeat Superman, taking off and escaping before anyone is able to do anything. Honestly, I'm actually really surprised that Wonder Woman didn't really do more here, because I feel like Diana definitely had the opportunity. But I guess, once you're holding Batman hostage, it's not much you can do because they're like, we don't want Batman to die. So, fair. Number 10, Squirrel Girl versus Dr. Doom. When Squirrel Girl was new on the scene, she was still weirdly proving how OP of a character she was. Although any fight involving Squirrel Girl you would think would be super unfair in terms of her being completely outmatched. And you'd be right about these fights being unfair, but it's usually more often the other way around, with many of her opponents standing no chance against her. One of her first fights happened to go just like that, featuring the brilliant and dangerous Dr. Doom, who found himself quickly trounced by Squirrel Girl when she attacked him with squirrels, leaving him to be pretty much embarrassed about this fight forever onward. Number 9, Captain America versus the Punisher. This was a very one-sided fight, not only on paper, but also just in terms of how this all went down. Two villains, Goldbug and Plunderer, were willing to join Captain America's side of the fight in Civil War, revealing that even the supervillain community was concerned about what would happen if Iron Man won. They might be villains, but they were people too, and were terrified at the prospect of the nation becoming a police state. Punisher didn't like the idea of working with villains though, and shot down their offer by literally gunning them down. This resulted in a pissed off Cap beginning a brutal fight with Frank, who refused to fight back because, well, Captain America was one of the good guys? So based on how this fight shook out, I don't know if you'd actually be able to tell. Captain America beats the Punisher within an inch of his life over the course of a handful of panels, and also calls him a murderous piece of trash. Wow, that is pretty brutal, Cap. Alright friends, before we move on to this next point, just a quick reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. It really does help us out here at the channel. Number 8, the Punisher versus Daken. In this fight, Punisher once again is brutally defeated by his opponent, though this time a lot more permanently. Punisher ends up being no match for Daken, who makes quick work of him despite all his guns. I mean, we already knew this was how it was going to end, didn't we? Considering Daken takes after his dad, Logan, and has a pretty intense healing factor. The real impressive thing though is just how much of a beating and stabbing Frank withstands before Daken inevitably takes the victory. In the end, Daken decapitates Frank Castle, killing him, though Frank of course would later come back as the monster Frankencastle and then later be returned to his old self once again. Number 7, Black Canary versus Superman. Pretty much any Injustice fight against Superman is brutal because of how powerful Superman is known for being, and of course how crazed and evil he is here. Black Canary attempts to take down the big bad Superman in Injustice, and at least she came armed with a gun and a kryptonite bullet to do so. Still, this fight ends how you'd expect it to, with Black Canary being no match for the Man of Steel. Well, almost anyways. She successfully shoots him, taking him out momentarily, but he is then chosen as a Yellow Lantern because of his immense ability to instill fear in others, which honestly I agree. Although she may be taken out by Superman's heat vision right after that with a shot straight to the gut, she does still end up getting a different kind of victory through her defeat. A consolation prize at least. She's wearing contacts that have the ability to record everything she sees, allowing people to see just how much of a brutal tyrant Superman has become, because they broadcast it everywhere. Also, I feel like if you actually put in contacts that had cameras in them, even in the future, even if like the technology was amazing, they still have to be pretty thick. Like, I have a hard enough trouble putting regular contacts in my eyes on days when I have to do that. Number 6, Hawkgirl versus Barbastos. Granted, this was Nth Metal Enhanced Hawkgirl, but still, if you had told me this was how Dark Knight's metal was going to go down, I wouldn't have believed you. In the end, Hawkgirl was the one to defeat Barbastos in the comic. Though of course, that wouldn't be completely where that story would end, as we saw with the continuation in Dark Knight's Death Metal. However brief the fight between Hawkgirl and the Bat God was, it was still pretty cool that she was the one who ended up taking him down. Even if it was only because of, well, the Element X blade that she was really able to do this. Barbados is basically a god, so on paper this fight in general just sounds pretty crazy. Number 5, the Punisher versus Wolverine, and Spider-Man, and Daredevil. Now you might expect you know how this one should go, but let's also remember that this is Garth Ennis writing Punisher, so yeah. It doesn't really go down the way you'd think. Instead, the Punisher manipulates the three heroes briefly into turning against one another when they seek to bring him in. These three are hoping to team up to essentially essentially arrest Punisher and then turn him over to the courts and, you know, get him convicted with like the law and all of that stuff, even though Wolverine needs a bit of convincing when it comes to this approach at the beginning. Punisher takes out all 3 of these heroes, even managing to disable Spider-Man by convincing him that if he moves, bombs will go off. You'd think Spider-Man would actually be able to sense whether or not this was true, but I digress. I guess his Spidey sense wasn't working that well that day. Number 4, Superman versus Batman. I mean, you'd think you know how this one should shake out, considering Batman is just a normal human with a bunch of money and, well, years of training. However, in Dark Knight Returns, we get to be pleasantly surprised. A normal man, even when as skilled as Bruce Wayne, you'd think would just be no match for Superman, especially as, well, he's getting on in years here, whereas Kal-El, while also being older, barely looks or seems to have aged at all. But Batman uses all of his strategic skills, knowledge, and his gadgets to help him win this fight. And man, does it go to show that you should never dismiss Batman just because he doesn't have conventional superpowers. Or superpowers at all. Batman has the best superpower, the superpower to know a ton about heroes because he does his homework. Number 3, The Punisher versus Sentry. During Dark Reign, Punisher refuses to stand by and let Norman Osborn become the world's new, biggest, and brightest hero, as S.H.I.E.L.D. is disbanded and Osborn becomes the head of its replacement organization, Hammer, and the new Dark Avengers team. Punisher aims to eliminate Norman Osborn, but standing in his way is the Sentry, who stops the Punisher's bullet mid-air as it soars towards Osborn's head. Sentry sets his sights on Frank, and, well, I think you can imagine how this one goes. Still, at least this fight is gratifying in the sense that it isn't over with like a 1-2 punch. Instead, we actually watch as the Punisher tries everything he can to try to defeat Sentry, knowing it's pretty much all hopeless, but refusing to give up. And he does all this while being brutalized by Robert, who initially just wants to talk it out and arrest Punisher without a fuss. So that's how Punisher is actually able to survive, because Sentry just wants to talk. Punisher's skills and weapons aren't what save him actually at the end of the day. He simply manages to get lucky when Robert doesn't call out his get out of jail attempt at bluffing. Thank goodness. Number 2, Superman versus Alfred Pennyworth. You would think you already know how this fight would shake out, but hey, it didn't go down quite the way most of us would expect when it happened in Injustice. After Superman broke Batman's back with the good old Bane snap over the knee move, he had a brief moment of regret as Batman called him out for being more monster than hero, for torturing him, all while claiming it was for the greater good. As Superman considers what he's just done, he turns to Alfred, who has approached him. However, Alfred didn't approach Superman to, you know, communicate any words of wisdom here or to help Clark come back around and like regain his senses and see the error of his ways. He came to teach Superman a lesson about attacking Bruce. Alfred used a pill which temporarily granted him the same level of strength as Superman, making this super uneven fight on paper a lot more even in reality. Using the element of surprise, Alfred was then able to beat Superman to a pulp while confessing that he was very disappointed at him before scooping up Bruce and taking him to safety. Reminding everyone that even when it comes to facing powerful foes like Superman, Alfred is still and will always be a badass. In case people forgot. Number 1, Squirrel Girl versus Galactus. I freaking love this fight, and I love that I started this list with Squirrel Girl and I'm ending it with her, even though this fight is super ridiculous. You wouldn't think someone like Squirrel Girl, whose powers include communicating with and controlling squirrels and sharp teeth, would be able to take on and even defeat the epic force of Galactus, who is nigh unstoppable and comes armed with the Power Cosmic, which basically allows you to do, well, whatever writers need whoever wields it to do. Power Cosmic, by the way, turns out does help Galactus to communicate in the vacuum of space as well. In the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl issue 4, Squirrel Girl defeats Galactus by realizing that the only way to defeat him is by offering him an alternate planet to devour other than Earth. She and Tippy Toe manage to access the databases in his ship's computers and find one that is covered in nuts, which they manage to convince Galactus are delicious and nutritious, full of calories, life energy. Life energy. As strange as this all sounds, the whole issue is pretty great when it comes to writing, so as weird as it sounds that Squirrel Girl was able to beat Galactus, it actually really makes sense in this context.
Kicking off the list at number 10. Wolverine vs. Hulk. This one is wild, okay? We all know Wolverine is ripped, and he gets really ripped in this one. And I don't mean ripped like jacked either, I mean ripped like in half. This one comes from Wolverine vs. Hulk, and it's more than brutal. So in this story, Wolverine is sent to Tibet to assassinate the Hulk. The problem is, he's the Incredible Hulk, so it may sound easier than it looks. So when the battle between these two started up, it's loud, it's messy, and it's going to be pretty violent. Hulk picked Wolverine up and literally broke him into two, tossing his lower half up a mountain and leaving Wolverine's torso bleeding in the snow down below. Just another day in the Ultimates, you know? Being the world's greatest tracker and all, Wolverine smelt his legs that were a few miles up the mountain and then did a really slow, really painful climb to get those smelly feet back where they belong. The series was actually delayed in real life, so this journey up the mountain to get his legs back took 3 years for readers to finally see. Imagine if you had to wait that long to see the next episode after like a Breaking Bad finale or something. 3 years? That's insane. I couldn't do it. And before we head over to number 9, guys, if you wanted to go ahead and give us a thumbs up for this video, that would be great. It helps out the studio a lot. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now let's dive back into this list. Number 9, Batman vs. Bane. Directed by, of course, Christopher Nolan, who had done the previous installments, comes a pretty epic conclusion to the Dark Knight trilogy. Released in 2012, The Dark Knight Rises, as you can guess from the title alone, is about Batman rising up. From where? Why? What's going on? Well, how about a broken back thanks to Bane? So this is 8 years after the Joker had a run-in with Gotham City. So now Batman has returned to take down Tom Hardy as he mumbles and frowns aggressively in this film. We get one of my favorite fight scenes from any superhero movie. And what I love about this scene so much is that there's no music to it at all. All you hear is Batman legitimately struggling to try and fight this dude. And it makes it more realistic. It's stressful, and you can see Bruce become more and more exhausted by each punch. And it all comes to a screeching halt when Bane picks up Bruce for one last blow, right to the spinal cord.
Spirit! Oh, your buddy!
Now, I know people like to give this movie a hard time, but seeing Batman get his ass kicked like this reminds me that it's not always the hero that gets the last punch. Number 8, Magneto vs. Wolverine. Look, I'll be honest, I'm a nail biter, okay? And there's days where I can't even muster up the strength to pull a hangnail out of my own finger or whatever. It sucks, I can't deal with pain, especially when something's coming out of my body, which makes the next one on this list really brutal for me to read. Now, I couldn't imagine if all of my bones were suddenly ripped out of my body. That's a nightmare. And that's exactly what happens to Wolverine when Magneto has had enough of his nonsense. Yeah, this all takes place during the Fatal Attractions event. So Wolverine doesn't even have a chance to scream. The adamantium that bonded to his bones erupted outwards like water bursting through a dam. And he's still breathing when this happens. I mean, if this isn't one of the worst things to go through, I couldn't tell you what is. Definitely not one of my hangnails. This one is probably a little bit more painful. Thankfully, Xavier wiped Magneto's memory of the whole event, and Wolverine was out of commission for a while recovering. I mean, he had mental spikes sticking out of his body. I don't think he's gonna get any chores done in the meantime. Number 7, The Avengers vs. Thanos. The Russo brothers came in the MCU with the Winter Soldier, and we got that sick, awesome elevator scene, and then we got Civil War. They make some pretty fun movies. My personal favorite of the bunch is still Infinity War. I mean, all these characters who led their own franchise crammed into one single movie shouldn't have worked out as well as it did. It's a smooth flick. So we see Thanos as he walks his way through the universe collecting the cosmic Infinity Stones. First, he decimates Xandar for the Power Stone, gave Loki the old 1-2 choke for the Space Stone, and then he punched the Hulk so hard in the neck that he quit being the Hulk. And this is like the first 10 minutes of the movie. So the movie itself is a brutal fight, but of course it comes down to the last stone, the last attempt. The Mind Stone. The stone that is Vision. It's in his forehead. So after a last effort attempt of removing the stone in Wakanda, Wanda Maximoff is forced to destroy it. So while she's working on that, all of our Avengers are getting destroyed by the powers that Thanos now obtains, but they don't come out on top in this one. Vision gets that big yellow blackhead pulled right out of his forehead, and then the theater sat silent, and we just watched Vision's lifeless and colorless body fall to the ground. Seeing the Avengers lose like this, especially Vision, was definitely one of the more brutal beatdowns in an MCU movie. Number 6, Null vs. Thor. Spoilers coming in hot for King in Black by Donny Cates, okay, just so you guys are aware. So during the first battle with Null and his army of symbiotes, Thor was not to be found. The God of Thunder would be a perfect fight considering the weakness of the Horde being electricity and magic. Kinda makes sense. He'd be a pretty reliable chess piece to this violent game, no doubt about it. So when the God of Thunder finally arrived in issue 3 of King in Black, he brought a pretty epic battle with him. So Noel had come to Earth with his thousands of symbiote dragons, searching for Eddie Brock's son, Dylan. Searching for you, Dylan, they're coming, man. And when he finally got a hold of Eddie, he stripped him of the symbiote and dropped him from the Empire State Building. Things are looking not so great. And then Thor returns finally in the next issue. So you're a god and a king, Thor asks. Good for you. Now allow me to teach you what those words truly mean. And he does just that. Of course, with the help of Tony riding in on an extremis infected symbiote, it's just another week and a bit and we'll see this epic battle continue with issue 4. But so far, it's up to a crazy, crazy awesome start. Number 5, Spider-Man vs. Morlun. It's all fun and games until somebody gets poked in the eye. Or maybe if you're Spider-Man, it's all fun and games until you get your eye yanked out. Perhaps one of the worst things I could imagine. In the Spider-Man storyline, The Other, Evolve or Die, we see Spider-Man go toe-to-toe with Morlun, and he gets his butt kicked. It gets so bad that Spider-Man actually breaks his knuckles while he's trying to fight this dude. That's how intense this battle already is. Things, of course, take a horrible turn for the worse when Morlun decides to grab Spider-Man's left eye and then yank. No, he didn't, Spider-Man says. Oh, yes, he did. I said out loud on the bus in front of people. Dude, he pulled his eyeball out, and then to make us feel even more sick than we already do, Morlun proceeds to eat his eyeball, and he even commented on how delicious it was. But if I could ask one question, do the eye colors matter when it comes to like eyeball flavor? Like I got brown eyes, maybe that's like a mapley kind of smoky kind of vibe. I don't know, maybe my eyes are pretty yummy. Somebody ask Army Hammer, see what he thinks about eyes. Number 4, Hulk vs. everybody. Okay, this one's pretty wild. So Thor Ragnarok was loosely based off of the Planet Hulk storyline. And I say loosely because in the comics, well, that story didn't end up going so well. See, on Sakaar, the rocket that he arrived in ended up blowing to smithereens, causing some casualties that left him a little heartbroken, to say the least. So he rolls his shoulders back a few times, and then he heads back to Earth, and thus begins the World War Hulk storyline. He just destroys everybody. I mean, all the heroes that Earth loves at this point, just in the path of this death train. Like he locks the Illuminati in Madison Square Garden, and then he makes them fight to the death. That in itself is brutal. That's crazy. But I mean, I guess if you spend enough time on Sakaar, that just becomes second nature, you know? The whole story is a bloody good mess. I mean, it's great seeing the panic on the Avengers' faces this entire time. It's scary. So make sure if you haven't already to grab all 5 issues of 2007's World War Hulk, because it's a treat. The whole thing's a big battle. Number 3, Spider-Man Close to Home. So when a supervillain escapes, it's not a great time. Usually they're going to come back for the person that put them in there in the first place. So Ultimate Spider-Man's death is absolutely beautiful, and of course it's really, really sad. It's done really well. So after tackling Captain America and literally taking a bullet for him, Peter is left to fight the Green Goblin, Electro, Sandman, Vulture, and Kraven. They are all waiting for him. They all wanted a piece of the spider, and in the end, they got what they wanted. The entire climax happens in Peter's neighborhood, basically. So everybody's running to safety and he's limping around. He's doing his absolute best. He's pulling off fire hydrants and using Electro's current to do some damage to other guys. He's giving it everything he's got. And that's the beauty of this one. He's exhausted from the start. He gets shot before this fight even happens. And you feel it while you're reading it. This is a plot that I think we're gonna finally see in the next Spider-Man movie. I mean, hopefully. With all these villains knowing Peter's true identity now, we could get them all literally showing up at his house, bringing the battle to him. Let's just hope it doesn't end the same way with Peter's heroic death. See, Miles actually saw this whole fight take place, so it actually inspired him to take on the mantle of Spider-Man. So these villains may have won this time, but Miles Morales is coming for you. Number 2, Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe. This issue was released in August 2012, and it is exactly what it sounds like. So what's the story here? Why does Wade want everybody dead? Well, the X-Men put Wade into the Ravencroft Asylum in attempts to heal his insanity, but the doctor wasn't too good at handling a task because the doctor was actually Dr. Psycho Man. So the procedure went well, I'd say. You know, something happened. He brainwashed Wade in hopes to shut down all these inner voices, and well, it worked. Awesome, hooray, there we go. It worked, but the only downside was those voices were now replaced with voices that were encouraging him to kill everybody in the Marvel Universe. And this is a must read. From start to finish, it is brutal, it is graphic, it's an easy one on this list. Number 1, Iron Man vs. Captain America. Seeing two of your friends argue is uncomfortable enough, let alone seeing two of your superhero friends try and kill each other. Captain America Civil War is one of my favorite Marvel movies to watch, because when these guys finally battle it out, there's years of history behind it. Captain America Civil War was released in 2016, directed again by the Russo brothers, and the whole movie is politics. It's superhero politics, like in the comic, minus, most things from the comic, like the school blowing up, for instance. Let's leave that part out of this movie. But in the film adaptation, Tony sides with the government and the Sokovia Accords. He feels responsible for the death of Charles Spencer, or rather with the whole Weekend of Ultron stuff. Steve wants to protect Bucky, and freedom throughout the entire team definitely wouldn't hurt either. So eventually, due to Baron Zemo's sneaky little snake work, he gets Tony in the same room as Steve, and we see footage of a brainwashed Bucky kill Tony's parents. The next 10 minutes are just filled with them both trying to end each other. Tony even blasted Bucky's arm off during this fight. He's going for blood. So Cap decides last minute to stick the shield in Tony's suit, and that shield Tony made very clear didn't belong to Cap, and that it belonged to his father.
Coming in at number 10, Superman vs. the Puzzler. There's no doubt that Superman has faced his fair share of hard-fought battles. Villains who actually make him work up a sweat at least, and ones that force him to use some of his more stronger powers. However, when the matchup is so unfair, Superman barely has to even try, and on top of that, he did use some of his lamer powers to defeat the Puzzler. The Puzzler that Superman faced here was the female version named Valerie Van Hoften. For years, she had admired Superman, even wanting to become a hero just like him. However, when she was unable to realize this dream, she turned to a life of crime and was eventually hired to kill the man that she once adored. Valerie has this unique ability to break her body down into puzzle pieces, but remember though, unique doesn't always mean powerful. Sure enough, when these two squared off, Superman just straight up tore her to shreds. I mean, that is her power, but if you're going to break into a billion little pieces, you better make sure that your opponent can't punch people into space. Now, as I mentioned at the start of this point, Superman doesn't even really have to try here. He relies on his lamest power, which is super breath. I mean, come on. If you have a lamer power that Superman has, leave me a comment down below. But just like that, the Puzzler is rendered useless from this breath. A cold breath. And then perhaps what's even more humiliating is that on her second time around, she ended up in a trash can. Yeah, very unfair. Coming in at number 9, Captain Boomerang vs. The Flash. This is another one of those fights where you see the villains psyching themselves up for a few pages, but you know that they have absolutely no chance. The Flash, in my opinion, gets overlooked far too often, probably because he isn't exactly a physically intimidating hero, and most of the time the heroes that can punch the hardest usually dominate the fight. But the Flash has superhuman speed, so he could technically kill his enemy before they even have a chance to introduce themselves. That's the delicate balance with the writing in a Flash comic book, and why it's a little bit different from the other ones. They have to walk this fine line between enemies that have the brain of a goldfish and a hero that seems to never remember his strongest power when a fight comes his way. But even so, this fight between Captain Boomerang and the Flash is so ridiculously one-sided. The Flash can outrun bullets, but old Boomerang here, who looks more like a lunch lady, actually thought that he could beat the Flash with a slower projectile that was designed to be returned to him. Then if that wasn't dumb enough, he straps explosives to said boomerangs. Seems like a flawless plan. Would somebody get this guy a Boomerang for Dummies handbook though, because he's gonna blow himself up. Coming in at number 8, Batman vs. Calendar Man. I'm sure that just by hearing the title of this point, you already know how this one's going to go. I'm sorry, but a guy who commits crimes related to the date is just one of the weirdest supervillains, and not very smart considering the fact that Batman is a master detective. What's worse about this villain is that he's literally wearing a costume designed to correlate with the date of the crime that he committed, making it even easier to spot him. Due to this, he has become notoriously known as a joke to both heroes and other villains even. This matchup is so unfair that Batman would probably be better off just letting the Gotham Police Department arrest him on their own. Calendar Man is a successful inventor that is capable of designing machinery required for his various schemes, but put that against billionaire Bruce Wayne and there is no question that Batman is going to come out on top every single time. Coming in at number 7, Thunder Punch vs. the Transformers. Now, remember when I said that most superheroes are just people that punch really hard? Well, sometimes that isn't enough to cut it. And in the case of Thunder Punch, we feel even worse because his punches would probably be better suited for, I don't know, someone his own size. You see, Thunder Punch was one of the Neo Knights, this super team that was hell-bent on destroying the Transformers. Although, they didn't even try to design any new technology to do this. They just thought punching people really hard would be sufficient. I mean, it's worked out for other people, but not this case. Turns out when your opponent is a 4-story tall robot that can turn into a tank, punching him is just not gonna do the trick. trick. The strangest part about Thunder Punch is the lack of logic when facing an enemy this big. The Transformers could step on him and not even notice. What's worse is the design of his costume, which completely exposes his hands. His body is coated in metal and hard fabric, but he chose to not cover up the one thing that he was hitting a robot with. Real smart. Coming in at number 6, Wolverine vs. Magneto. Now this one here is deceiving because Wolverine has held his own against some really tough supervillains, but Magneto is, well, Magneto. During the 90s event called Fatal Attractions though, the X-Men were forced to attack Magneto's new asteroid base. Once there, an intense fight takes place where Professor X and Jean are telepathically attacking Magneto while Wolverine wounds him on the physical plane. This ultimately made Magneto really angry, and what followed was perhaps one of the most horrific comic book panels in X-Men history. Because Wolverine's skeleton is made of adamantium, Magneto could manipulate this just enough to rip the metal out of his body. This left Wolverine completely incapacitated and now with large spikes of metal sticking out of his body. His only savior was the fact that Professor X was able to wipe Magneto's memory before he could finish the job. In at number 5, Daredevil vs. the Fantastic Four. Now we must give credit where credit is due. Daredevil certainly put up a valiant effort, but ultimately this was a 4-on-1 bout. The Fantastic Four are among the most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe, and Daredevil is a blind lawyer. Well, he can also do karate, but he has to be extra crafty when it comes to planning his attacks. In the 1968 comic book The Flames of Battle, Daredevil decided to attack the Four Freedoms Plaza, and I gotta say, he was pretty successful. I mean, he somehow fooled the Human Torch into knocking over a water tower, and then he was able to get Mr. Fantastic to attack the thing by accident. Originally, when Jack Kirby had drawn Daredevil just beating the crap out of the thing, Stan Lee had to step in and say that it made absolutely no sense, which is why we saw Lee writing in a part of the story that sees Daredevil getting Reed Richards to accidentally hit the thing with a nerve blast ray. Although the humor in how weak the Daredevil character is in comparison still resides in those thought bubbles. Right after the thing is blasted, Daredevil stands back and thinks to himself, it wasn't my kick that stopped him. Probably not the best idea to be a superhero with low self-esteem, but there it is. Coming in at number 4, Batman vs. Guy Gardner. Next up, we have the master billionaire detective again against the Green Lantern Guy Gardner. Gardner is wielding one of the most powerful weapons in the universe, but in 1987, this was somehow no match for Batman's money, punches, and cool technology. During the Justice League International number 5, Guy Gardner's lips were flapping as per usual, and so his big mouth got a big punch from Batman. In theory, Gardner should be more than capable of taking out Batman, but due to his extreme arrogance, he removed his power ring right before taking a swing at the Dark Knight. The removal of his ring automatically makes this an unfair fight for Guy Gardner, and in comparison to the big villains Batman has taken down, he makes quick work of Guy in this fight. Coming in at number 3, Star Fox vs. the Incredible Hulk. During the Incredible Hulk number 300, Bruce Banner is hulking out as per usual, except in doing so, he begins to completely demolish New York City. Now the Hulk is required to be doing this, and yet despite him laying down his big green punches, most of the Marvel squad seems pretty concerned. Now if any fellow hero was deserving of a beatdown for trying to stop the Hulk, it's Star Fox. And I have a feeling the rest of the Avengers would agree because he's notoriously one of the creepiest comic book characters of all time. Star Fox decides that the way he's going to soothe the Hulk is by using his special ability to emit waves of erotic pleasure. Now I don't claim to be a genius, but I'm fairly certain you can't take down the Hulk with waves of pleasure. Even if you could, how do you expect that to end gracefully? Thankfully, the Hulk was able to knock some sense into Star Fox and hit him with one of the hardest punches he's probably ever felt in his life. It was an extremely one-sided interaction that definitely made Star Fox rethink his approach. Coming in number 2, Dazzler vs. Dr. Doom. This one is just sad. Not only does Dazzler lose this fight, but she does so in her own comic book. We're not sure what the writers were thinking when they made Dazzler because her powers are definitely not what one would expect to see from a superhero. Dazzler rocks a shiny outfit with a deep neckline and can convert sound into light, plus she wears roller skates. Well, she can skate really fast. I mean, it seems more like the resume of a DJ, but okay. Somehow the writers find a way to make sense of this hero attacking Dr. Doom, and her big plan is even more sad to watch play out. You see, Dazzler's dazzling plan to kill one of the most powerful supervillains of all time was to just skate at him really fast. That's like an astronaut saying, in order to reach the moon, I will now be climbing the world's largest ladder. Dazzler tries to hit him with her light show after this, but Dr. Doom just ultimately ends up electrocuting the entire room and capturing her until the Fantastic Four can arrive to save her. Coming in at number 1, Spider-Man vs. the Sinister Six. Spider-Man is a kid with superpowers that has to experience puberty and bullying all at the same time, so there's no question that he's well versed when it comes to adversity, and supervillains are constantly adding to this pressure for him to remain on his toes at all times. However, even the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man can become overwhelmed from time to time. For example, when Dr. Octopus got the Sinister Six back together, they were fresh out of prison and had a lineup that featured the Hobgoblin and a new Sandman. Safe to say that if it weren't for Doc Ock's own ego and Spidey's superpowered friends, his days could have easily been numbered by the Sinister Six.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Spider-Man, Jester, and Jack-O-Lantern. The MCU's Captain America's Civil War is much more tame than the comic book. I mean, for starters, in the comic, Peter sides with Tony until he realizes that Tony is spying on him, so he switches over to Cap's side. That didn't happen in the movie at all. So in the comic, this causes Stark to send out Jester and Jack-o'-lantern to go and fight Spider-Man. So Peter ended up getting his butt kicked to these guys, and it's all thanks to Stark. There's no chance also that Peter should have lost to them. I mean, imagine if he didn't lose, the entire story would be so different. At first, the two thought taking orders from S.H.I.E.L.D. was a bum deal, as they put it, a bum deal. That is until they got the orders to fight Spider-Man, which they made very clear that they enjoyed doing. And before we continue on with this list, if you guys could go ahead and give us a thumbs up on this video, it helps the channel out a lot. We really appreciate it. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now back to our list. Number 9, Batman vs. Guy Gardner. Okay, this one comes from Justice League issue 5, and it's commonly known as the punch. We have a punch and we have a slap. Now it's time to talk about the punch. So in this comic, Batman comes to take over the Justice League International, and Guy Gardner doesn't share the same enthusiasm as the rest of the team. So for more than one issue, he makes it very clear that he doesn't like this new leader. He's not a fan of the Bats. So naturally, a large conflict was growing, although Batman was clearly the better fit for the role. So he challenged Batman to a fight without the use of his power ring. Big mistake. And then Batman proceeded to knock him out with one punch. One punch, one punch. Yes, here we go. Blue Beetle even got pumped about it and started yelling, one punch, one punch. Hence why it's a big thing now. This is an amazing moment and an even greater lesson rather, but a Green Lantern getting knocked out by a human punch should never happen, ever. Never. Don't start fights you can't win without the ring that makes you a superhero, or else you're just a guy in a suit. Pun intended.
Coming in at number 8, we've got Ultimate Dr. Octopus versus Ultimate Green Goblin. In the Ultimate Marvel universe, both Otto Octavius and Norman Osborn became their supervillain alter egos in the same accident, with Otto's mechanical arms being grafted onto his body in the same experiment that transformed Norman Osborn into a muscular version of the Green Goblin. After fighting together against Spider-Man for years, Doc Ock finally saw an opportunity to leave his life of crime behind when he was free from prison. However, the Green Goblin refused to give up on his quest for revenge, and after being enraged by Otto's comments on Spider-Man potentially being their greatest creation as scientists, he flat out murdered Octavius in the street to keep the rest of his superpowered followers in line. That's gonna be a yikes from me, Norman.
Number 7, Captain America and Sharon Carter. We go back now again to the Civil War comic book event where Captain America was killed by Sharon Carter. Yeah, after Crossbones sniped him, Agent 13, who was also at the time Cap's girlfriend, delivered the final bullet from a much closer point. Well, it turns out it wasn't Sharon who was doing the work, really. I mean, the classic brainwashing made this defeat happen. Dr. Faustus, yeah, this causes a whole chain of events. I mean, for starters, Bucky decides at that point that he should go and try and kill Iron Man, blaming him for the death of Steve Rogers. And then Falcon also goes after his own lead. Now, Tony ended up showing Bucky the letter that Cap wrote about how he should be the next Captain America, and Bucky agrees to take the spot only if he can operate solo. No shield, no nothing, I'm not working for you, I'm not punching in, I'm just doing my thing. And to think that all this came to a climax after Steve's girlfriend, of all people, was the one to deliver the fatal blow, it's just heartbreaking, and it's something that never should have happened. Number 6, Squirrel Girl and Dr. Doom. So Squirrel Girl has beaten some big bads in the Marvel Universe before. She's taken down MODOK, Mandarin, and at one point Thanos. It's becoming a running joke by now, but one defeat that always shocks me is when a bunch of squirrels took down Victor Von Doom. Just a bunch of squirrels. Yeah, it happened back in the 90s in Marvel Superheroes issue 8. So she bumps into Iron Man and then starts to show what she can do, alright? She's trying to give him a run for his money in order to show how rough and tough she really can be. So she shows him her mutant powers, like jumping, hopping, climbing, all like a squirrel. It's amazing. He's fascinated. She's even pumped to show him that she can also sound like a squirrel too, which, I mean, if you can do it, I would love to see that. Fair. But the most impressive of all these abilities has to be when an abundance of squirrels is commanded to jump onto Stark, and then enter Dr. Doom. Doom comes in and he interrupts Stark's electronics. So, in order to save Tony at this point, she needs to send a horde of squirrels onto the Doom ship. Just a horde of squirrels. As if they don't have, wives and kids to go back home. They have nuts to store and eat. They have things to do, right? And voila, Stark is free thanks to the insane squirrel posse. Then the rodents get their fur on Dr. Doom and he's forced to retreat and jump into nearby water. It's the best panel ever. He's like, squirrels? No way, man, I'm out of here. Good riddance, peace. And then he literally runs away and jumps. Like he's out of there. He wants nothing to do with that. One of those times you're happy the hero won, but like, squirrels. We have a lot of squirrels up here in Canada. I don't think they can take on Dr. Doom. They're pretty fat. Number 5, Spider-Man and the Red Goblin. The Red Goblin. It's a mix between the Green Goblin and Carnage. I mean, you have a combination of 2 of the most powerful bad guys ever against Peter. He shouldn't have won this, I don't think. Let me explain. Appearing in the Amazing Spider-Man 798, this all came to life after Norman Osborn stole the Carnage symbiote, and after that, all hell just broke loose. He created this monster. So Norman used the Carnage symbiote to eject all the nanites, but then that ended up creating this monster mashup, becoming the Red Goblin. It was like a science experiment that made things worse for everyone, but better for him almost. So the rare weaknesses that the symbiote did have went away once the 2 had merged, making him like unstoppable. Peter Parker for sure should have lost this battle. I mean, he's so overpowered here. I mean, even the bombs that he throws at Spider-Man are upgraded versions of his own bombs. This time around, the bombs are red Carnage bombs that Pete can't even sense. It's all fused together and it's really intimidating. It's very scary. So Pete seems to agree by his choice of words. Peter admits a few pages later, after he retreats, that he couldn't last 3 minutes in the ring with him. Yeah, I agree. The readers are like, absolutely. You're absolutely right. The final issue had Peter get the upper hand on Osborn by mind games? Yeah, he explains how Carnage will get all the glory here in this defeat of Spider-Man and not Norman Osborn. I mean, ego is a great place to attack. If it works, it works. So when he becomes Norman Osborn again, the fight is manageable now, and Spider-Man can come out on top. Now, as great as this is, I really don't think it would be this easy to turn the tides. Not after seeing Carnage bombs. Get out of here, no way. Number 4, Batman and the Hulk. Yep, you heard me. So back in the late 70s, Marvel and DC came together for a handful of crossovers. One of these crossovers featured a battle with the Incredible Hulk and Batman. There have been many conversations about who would win in a fight between Iron Man and Batman. If you're a fan of this page, odds are you've had this talk with your friends, because they're both humans who rely on their brains and brawn to get by. Kind of even. Personally, I'd pick Batman to win that fight any day. But the Hulk, no chance. Batman vs. the Hulk, issue 27 of DC Comics Special Series. So we have Batman and the Joker trying to control the Green Giant. And when the Hulk gets his hands on Batman, well, that should have been the end for sure. Even Batman said he felt like his spine was going to snap like a pencil. And believe me, if anybody knows what that feels like, it's definitely Batman. So he gets out of his grasp by a nice double ear smack, and then he finishes him off by using some sleeping gas from his belt, followed by a nice flying kick. Now, it's great to see Batman use his skills to take down the Beast. That's what he's good at. Unfortunately, I don't think any fight between them would ever last long enough to give him the chance to do so, especially if he has him in his hands. He would be dead. Number 3, Iron Man and Magneto. Now, when I say that, your first thought probably is, well, of course Magneto would win a fight fighting a guy in a metal suit, but this wasn't the case during an X-Men vs. Avengers storyline. If you think this is a no contest, you've never met Tony Stark. So Stark gets buried by Magneto under 200 tons of rubble, because even though Tony's suit at this point was made of carbon nanotubes, the island that he was fighting on was made of metal. So step 2 was for Tony to release a swarm of high-tech magnets to try and throw him off his game a little bit. This of course didn't work. You're giving magnets to Magneto, you know? So Magneto tried reaching out to the cosmos to channel power from other planets, but in doing so, he sensed a disruption in the form of the Phoenix Force. So while he was distracted there, Tony took this as an opening and knocked him out. Now, as fun as this was, and it led to other fun things, it was also highly unlikely that Iron Man will beat Magneto again. If this happened on the big screen, fans would rip it apart, no doubt about it.
Number 2, Death. Not like the character Death, but the actual concept itself. In the 2000 Harley Quinn solo series, we see Harley die and go to hell. But you already knew that from my point about Hell's best bounty hunter, Ulysses Highwater. To continue on from that point, Harley doesn't only defeat Highwater in the end by piecing together what he really wants and why and getting it for him, but in doing so, she also manages to escape hell and death itself. You see, Harley wants to help Highwater reconnect with his son as he's hunting down the man who stole him away. His lover, Nathan Drum. His son's lover, not his lover, who he blames for actually corrupting his son. Harley finds out, unsurprisingly, that Highwater's son and Drum are of course not in hell, but somewhere likely much better. The other place perhaps being heaven. She offers Highwater their whereabouts, but makes him promise not to punish either of them for finding love with one another. However, just as Highwater seems to agree and assures Harley that he actually loves his son very much, and so he wouldn't do that anyways, Etrigan shows up and kicks Harley out of hell. You see, she's just too much of a nuisance to remain there. After all, people aren't supposed to find things like love and forgiveness during their stay in hell. So yeah, he rhymes her the heck out of there, and then squeezes Loot Harley. He's like, you're too annoying. The Ballad of Harley Quinn.
And finally, number 1, Old Man Logan and the Hulk. I like the Hulk. He shouldn't really lose anything ever. That's the point I'm getting at. Seeing the Hulk fight Wolverine is something I hope we can see on the big screen in my lifetime. I mean, with all these franchises crossing over soon with WandaVision and stuff, maybe it's sooner than we think, but I doubt it. They have no reason to fight yet. But one of the highlight battles between these two beasts take place in Old Man Logan. Now, at the end of the story, Logan went back to finish off Hulk Gang, right? Of course. So soon after the Hulk comes out, they start fighting, even throwing cows at one another. Real wild stuff. Funny, gory, scary, loud, you name it. And then he turns into the big green guy, and boy, does it get ugly. So Billy Bob comes in the cave later on and sees just a mess. He sees bodies all over the floor, and then he sees Hulk struggling with some digestion problems. Odd. So then Wolverine literally rips his way out of his stomach, and that's what kills the Hulk. The Hulk should have won this fight for sure. If he didn't make the mistake of eating him, he probably could have done it. Or the Hulk should have healed after the whole Wolverine C-section thing, so the fight should have maybe continued. I mean, for the story to end this way, it was a little disappointing.
Coming in at number 10, we've got Deathstroke versus Gorilla Grodd, two villains with an unexpected rivalry with incredibly tragic origins. While working for the villainous organization Hive, Deathstroke and his ex-wife Adeline Kane are captured when the group is surprise attacked by Vandal Savage and Gorilla Grodd, the latter of which winds up cutting Adeline's throat for a ritual to unlock the power of the Fountain of Youth. Outraged and heartbroken, Deathstroke would go on a violent spree to exact revenge on Grodd, attacking the heart of gorilla civilization and killing multiple intelligent apes in his search for his true enemy, a situation where nobody wins and the villains just continue hurting themselves and others more and more.
Coming in at number 9, Green Goblin versus Hobgoblin. Green Goblin versus Hobgoblin seems to only have happened in the 90s Spider-Man animated series that you know I love to talk about, but it could have happened elsewhere, just according to my research. After Hobgoblin was introduced before Green Goblin, Osborn went kinda nuts because, you know, Goblin. But since Osborn was the one who equipped the Hobgoblin, he was able to know where he'd be and who he was under the mask, resulting in Goblin attacking Hobby at Wilson Fisk's tower base, kinda thing, who had also been discovered by Spider-Man, who was shocked to see multiple goblins. This fight was certainly more tame since it was a 90s cartoon, but it's still pretty damn cool to see the goblins going at it, in like a fighting to see which goblin reigns supreme kind of way, not going in any other way, you freaking sickos, okay? I know where your mind is. While you're in the gutter, could you please clear it out? Okay, it's full of leaves.
Number 8, Bruiser vs. Wolverine. Runaways, issue 12. So we see Logan and Molly Hayes, aka Bruiser, have a rather quick exchange. Now at this time, Wolverine was a member of the New Avengers, and he's trying to get to the bottom of what happened to Dagger. So he, Cap, and Iron Man went to find help from the Runaways, seeing as the signs were leading to Cloak being responsible. So Molly is one of the strongest heroes ever, for sure. But how she handled Wolverine was almost a little bit too easy. So they walk into the cathedral, Cap calmly asks her to stop screaming, and that Wolverine and him are not going to hurt her. Laying the foundation, good. Said very calm, from a very calm man. This is good. The screaming continues, and Wolverine even asks if she's heard of heightened senses, and then gives her 3 seconds to stop drilling a hole into his brain. So he counts 3, 2, and then the next page we have outside face down Logan in the snow. Then when he comes back in, he's quite embarrassed about what just happened, even saying how he won't tell anybody tonight what happened if they don't, as he brushes off some snow.
And at 7, New Goblin vs. Sandman and Venom. Spider-Man 3, while not the most favorite Sam Raimi movie, is still, in my opinion, a good movie. I like the scenes that everyone finds to be cringy, because I'm just a cringy guy. That thing, that's me. But I also love the climactic battle. Seeing Spider-Man get pummeled by 2 villains is certainly a harrowing sight, especially when he's already basically lost everything. But then an unlikely hero comes in, a man who has been the villain the whole movie. Harry Osborn, also known as the New Goblin, who had taken the same serum as his father but ends up using it in a better way. He ends up being critical in the fight against Sandman and Venom, using his bombs to take down Sandman and helping Peter save MJ and get to Venom before it was too late. This is certainly not a cop-out for this list though, because he was the villain the whole movie, okay? At least when he didn't lose his memories. Let's be honest here, okay? You know that even if it had its moments, it was still a good movie. I will die on this hill every single time.
If they can edit this in, I'm also in support of Spider-Man 3. I'll put that on the record. Coming in at number 6, we have to go with the Riddler versus the Joker, a confrontation so huge that it spawned an entire comic book event and turned all the villains of Gotham City against one another. When the Riddler reached out to the Joker to ask for his help in teaming up to finally kill the Batman together, the Joker responded by unexpectedly shooting the Riddler flat out in the stomach. This one act of violence kickstarted a series of escalations that wouldn't stop until hundreds more were dead and all of Gotham City had been carved out by the two warring factions. And while the two villains would eventually reconcile after Batman foiled both of their master plans, it just goes to show how dangerous two angry supervillains pointed at one another can be.
Halfway through in at number 5, Venom vs. Carnage. Venom vs. Carnage comes up whenever and whatever reality Carnage is introduced in. And while yes, Venom is a villain, he has a purpose. The symbiote wants to get back to Spider-Man and Brock wants to kill him. Sometimes the two share this goal. However, Carnage just wants, well, Carnage. So when he starts going a little too berserk, Venom does end up teaming up with Peter to stop him. Whether it's just because he needs Spider-Man alive, or Carnage goes too far and kidnaps someone Brock cares about, like in the 90s animated cartoon. But either way, it's certainly an interesting scenario, especially with Venom Let There Be Carnage having come out recently, which features this fight just as literally the main point of the movie. However, usually Venom doesn't seem to fear his asexually spawned son, which is, it's still weird. Carnage is Venom's son. That's an awkward family reunion. Like, why are there so many awkward familial relationships in comic books? I don't get it. Like, oh, what are you doing, step symbiote?
Coming in at number 4, we've got two of the most powerful villains in the Marvel Universe with Thanos versus Galactus. Now, with power levels as high as these two, their battling is a topic that is often debated by fans, as different encounters have led to very different outcomes. In situations where he's faced Galactus without an item, such as the Infinity Gauntlet on hand, Thanos has been essentially outmatched, only capable of landing a single blow on Galactus before the godlike strength of the power cosmic was able to defeat him. However, Thanos has a particular fondness for the Infinity Gems, they kind of made a few movies about those, and these powerful stones put him on a much more even playing field, able to beat the power cosmic down into submission and even crushing Galactus between two different planets. Come on guys, can't we all just learn to get along?
Number 3, Wonder Woman. Sometimes you have to defeat the ones you love for their own good and protection. That's what happened in this fight featuring Harley Quinn and Wonder Woman. Well, it was less a fight and more of a rescue slash kidnapped attempt, but still, Harley came out on top here and managed to defeat Wonder Woman. In order, of course, to rescue her. So, it was a nice defeat. Harley Quinn is actually a huge superhero fan herself, if you didn't know, especially of Wonder Woman and of Power Girl. In an attempt to protect Diana from those who were hunting her down, Harley disguised herself as a flower delivery person. And when Diana turned her back to go grab a pen to sign for the flowers, she knocked her out with a gas bomb. So yeah, it wasn't like a crazy epic fight, but still, it's pretty impressive that Harley was able to kind of pull one over on Wonder Woman there. Still beat her, gotta say.
Coming in at number 2, we've got our boy Thanos again, but this time he's facing off with Dr. Doom. And unfortunately, while the Infinity Gems might have given the Mad Titan the strength to stand up to Galactus and the Power Cosmic, in this one specific battle with Doom, Thanos didn't stand a chance. During the Battleworld saga, in which Victor Von Doom had become God Emperor Doom, Thanos approached his enemy on the battlefield and tried to give Doom one last chance to bow before a true god. And sadly for Thanos, he was vastly overestimating himself, as God Emperor Doom was capable of pulling a Mortal Kombat style fatality and pulling Thanos' spine and skull out of his still living body. And while eventually Doom would be overthrown and the Marvel Universe put back mostly to normal, Thanos will definitely think twice before trying to smack talk Dr. Doom ever again.
Finally, in at number 1, Joker vs. Red Skull. In 1996, Batman and Captain America came together for a crossover the likes of which nobody had ever seen. I mean, that's probably slightly exaggerated, but this was still a highly anticipated team up because, let's be real, it's Cap and Batman. However, when two heroes team up, you know that their villains are bound to as well. So the Joker and Red Skull had formed an alliance. That is, until the Joker found out who Red Skull really served, that being the German soldiers present in World War II, because I can't mention mention them for monetization reasons. Thanks YouTube, let's censor history. What are you, the public school system? Anyway, after finding out Red Skull's affiliations and who was really involved in the plan, Joker turned on Red Skull, showing that he at least had a bit of a moral code, saying, quote, "I may be a criminal lunatic, but I'm an American criminal lunatic." I don't know why Joker was shocked, given that Red Skull was literally walking around with that symbol on his chest, but Joker just seemed to think that it was a crazy disguise, which is the dumbest thing ever. Like, I think that's the dumbest thing that Joker's ever done. Like, even if it was a disguise, would you really want to be seen with that just walking around? Even if you are a criminal lunatic? Because of course not. You said it yourself, you're an American criminal lunatic.
Number 10, Magneto vs. Uranos. During an X-Men Red tie-in issue for the AXE Judgment Day event, in a fight that lasted barely a page and a half, Uranos completely destroys Magneto. And I mean destroys him. And never mind Magneto, although that brief battle is something to behold, Uranos completely wrecks most of Planet Arakko too. Well, him and his army, but still. While Magneto would later on get some sweet revenge on Uranos, in the first fight the two have, Uranos manages to wrench Magneto's heart from his body, seemingly killing him, which was very shocking at the time. However, we later learn that Magneto manages to stay alive to fight another day by controlling the metal in his blood, controlling its flow throughout his body. So even without a heart, his blood can move and he can stay alive. Also, for those of you claiming that Magneto shouldn't count on this list because he's a villain, I'd say that lately Magneto's actually been pretty heroic, so it's safe to count him here, at least from my perspective. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then you need to read some comics, because there's some really good X-Men books happening right now. You are missing out, like X-Men Red. And friends, before I move on to this next spot, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and you are like, oh my gosh, I wish they did this with like anime and manga, guess what? We do! And you can check it out over at Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. Number 9, Aquaman vs. the Death Kraken. I mean, this is definitely a one-sided fight, because in the end, Arthur has no chance but to basically give up. Or, well, I guess not give up per se, but to potentially sacrifice himself to defeat the enemy. Which makes it sound a lot more balanced than it is, but trust me, it's not that balanced of a fight. The Death Kraken is basically a giant cosmic kraken known as a space kraken. These beings roam the cosmos, devouring parts of, or in some cases, entire worlds. Kinda like Galactus, but more terrifying to behold because, you know, they're krakens. The Death Kraken has an intense hunger for death, and so it wants to actually devour worlds, whereas its twin, the Flood, hungers for oceans. In order to defeat the Death Kraken, Arthur realized that he had no other choice but to enter the Kraken, allowing it to basically consume him whole, as he had the life force within him, the opposite of the death energy that the Death Kraken was sustained by. So he was like, that should cancel the other one out and I should be able to defeat it. Aquaman successfully did defeat the creature, but it is implied that it cost him his life to do so. And I mean, I can't see any other way that would have gone. I mean, look at that thing. The Death Kraken is massive and it's horrifying. It's gigantic. I mean, that feels just like a very uneven fight, just seeing those two beings together. Number 8, Batman vs. Wonder Woman. It just goes to show you that although Batman is super skilled, prepared, strong of body, mind, and will, it isn't enough to rival the might that is Wonder Woman. In Wonder Woman, the Hecate, Batman attempts to apprehend a woman wanted for murder, but is blocked from doing so by Wonder Woman, who is tied and bound to that woman, Danielle Wellies, who is called on the right of Hecate. Performing the ritual correctly means that Danielle has Diana's protection, in exchange for her servitude to Diana. However, not only does Batman fail to beat Wonder Woman in combat to get Danielle from her, but he also fails when he tries to also use the same ritual to get Wonder Woman's protection. Yikes! That's a pretty bad defeat right there. He's sort of like, alright, maybe I can do the thing, and she's like, you can't do it. You kinda suck at it, Batman, but so nah. Number 7, Shazam vs. Superman. Shazam vs. Superman is a fight that everyone is always eager to know about when it comes to who ends up on top, who will win. They're so similar, but so different. Multiple times, the person who has won has actually been Superman though, despite his weakness to magic, specifically Shazam, or as he was once known, Captain Marvel's magic lightning. Despite this, Superman has before used Shazam's own lightning against him though, putting him in the way of it and thereby transforming Shazam back into his kid form of human boy Billy Batson, proving that sometimes it's not necessarily about power, but instead all you need is the right technique or course of action. to turn a fight. I think that's personally why I would always feel like Superman would usually win that fight, because I feel like Superman, he's just got the know-how a little bit more than Shazam does. Experience, you know, experience. Number 6, Gambit versus Wolverine. Although this might not be as satisfying for our editors here at Top 10 Nerd, sorry editors, this one comes to us from the Wolverine podcast series, really in essence a serial radio play, so not a lot of images, but there's lots of images of Wolverine and Gambit that exist, so hey. For this one, I am talking about Wolverine the Lost Trail. By the way, if you haven't listened to either The Long Night or Lost Trail, I highly recommend both. They are both very well cast, produced, and with a great story. And if you ever wanted to picture Richard Armitage as Logan, you can do so here, as it's his voice you're going to be hearing in this role. In the episode Greenhaven is Everywhere, the penultimate episode for this story, Logan frees himself from Jason Wyngarde's control, only to face a still mind-manipulated Gambit. While Gambit attempts to convince Logan with the words that joining Wyngarde's Greenhaven is the right thing for him to do, Logan, of course, refuses to hear it. He's not about the mind control right now, he's not feeling it. As a result, Gambit pulls out his cards and tensions begin to rise. The two actually circle each other, which you can hear reflected in the audio dialogue if you happen to be listening with headphones on. And in the end, when Logan decides the only way out of this is to take out Gambit, Remy goes for his bow staff. He's like, I don't even need my cards, I just need my bow staff. Not true in this case. Logan quickly cuts his staff in half. Gambit then asks Logan if he'll be cut in half next, to which Logan responds, nope, if I can't get through to you with words, pausing to punch him in the face before adding, fist to the face should do it. Which it did, so true. Number 5, the Justice League versus Perpetua. Sometimes when it comes to one-sided fights, it's about heroes smacking down other heroes, or heroes smacking down villains. But in this case, it's about a whole team of heroes who got destroyed by a single villain. Though to be fair, this villain is also kind of like woven into the fabric of reality, as it is understood not just in the DC universe, but beyond that, into the DC multiverse, and even kind of beyond that. During the events of Death Metal, Wonder Woman faces off with Perpetua earlier on, and could have stopped her, but when Perpetua first explains the true nature of anti-crisis energy, which Wonder Woman needs to use to defeat Perpetua's crisis energy, Wonder Woman is hesitant to use the anti-crisis. During her hesitancy, Perpetua and Batman Who Laughs destroy reality, rebuilding it with crisis energy in Perpetua's image, unleashing the dark multiverse, with Batman Who Laughs later in turn betraying Perpetua. Justice League loses, with Batman, Wonder Woman, and Supes all being given a new horrible place in this dark world. While this loss is shocking and intense, later Diana does become willing to unleash the anti-crisis energy after understanding the cost of it and deciding that although it's a pretty scary change, it's still better than, you know, Perpetua's and Batman Who Laughs' way. So it's a temporary loss, but still it was quite a dramatic one, and we got a lot of cool alternate versions of characters, so yay! Number 4, Doctor Doom vs. Squirrel Girl. In the same issue that Squirrel Girl handily defeated Iron Man, although he remained unimpressed with her, Squirrel Girl also takes on master villain Doctor Doom and once more proves her mettle as an unbeatable superhero. Here it was Squirrel Girl's ability to communicate with squirrels that allowed her to defeat Doom, causing him to abandon his own ship. I kid you not. I also love how Doom, I feel like, still sees this as a victory in his mind. Also, I bet Doom would say this was a Doombot. I don't know if this has been retconned to a Doombot yet, but I could see Doom saying that. Basically, Dorian Green has been an unstoppable force since day one, as Marvel Superheroes number 8 from the 1990s is actually her first appearance, if you can believe that. Number 3, Batman vs. the Joker. Not just any Joker either. For this point, we are talking about Emperor Joker. This is an extremely powerful version of the Joker who gets 99.99 of Mr. Mixie's Piddlix power after tricking him out of it. Mr. Mixie was going to give Joker 1%, but he got swindled by the jokester, because of course he did. The Joker uses his newfound power to do a bunch of nasty things, but one of which is basically tormenting Batman on a daily basis for killing him each and every day, only to resurrect him the next day, bringing him back so he can do it all over again. The defeat is actually so traumatic for Batman that eventually, when Superman does find a way to beat the Joker, restoring the world to normal, Superman is actually forced to take Batman's memories of the daily torment from his mind. Otherwise, Batman would have been unable to operate as a hero, or really a person, as that entire experience broke him. Also, you know something's bad when it breaks Batman. He's a pretty unbreakable guy normally. Number 1, Green Lantern vs. Batman. A lot of times Batman gets the final say in these Green Lantern Lantern fights. For this point, we are not talking about Hal Jordan though, but instead everyone's favorite Lantern, well, at least some people's favorite Lantern anyways, Guy Gardner. Guy Gardner is a Green Lantern who's been known to get on his teammates' nerves. At times, his cockiness is a little too much for his fellow heroes, which may have been the case when Batman referred to him as a mongrel. But of course, Guy did not take such an insult in stride. In response to this, he challenges Batman to a fight he is sure to lose, unfortunately. Batman accepts the challenge and knocks him out in one punch, which comes back a few different times in the comics. It's a pretty memeable and hilarious moment, to be honest. It's important to keep in mind that Guy, isn't using his ring in this fight, although he didn't get much of a chance to, even if he wanted to do that. As Mr. Miracle says, I'll say this for Batman, he's efficient. Just one punches Guy Gardner, oh boy.
Number 10. Magneto versus Red Skull. Magneto and the Red Skull are on opposite sides of history. Magneto grew up in a Jewish family living in Germany during World War II, and we all know Red Skull and Hydra's stance in World War II Germany, so it's safe to say that these two villains would almost never get along, right? In Acts of Vengeance from 1989, Magneto and Red Skull were actually temporarily united, but it's really important to note that Magneto was unsure whether this was the Red Skull that aided Germany in the slaughter of his people. So Magneto confronted him and Red Skull confirmed that he was indeed the original. It didn't take much for Magneto, the master of magnetism, to overpower the Skull, but unlike what you might think, Magneto does not take his life. Instead, Magneto leaves the Skull isolated in a stripped down fallout shelter 20 feet underground. He removed the ladder from the escape hatch, gave him 10 gallons of water, took out his homing transmitters, gave him no food and no light, just water, air, and his own depraved thoughts. Number 9. God King Doom versus Thanos. 2015's Secret Wars has Dr. Doom receiving the power of the Beyonders at the conclusion of time runs out. The Latvian dictator is able to save reality from complete destruction at the hands of the Beyonders, stealing their power and merging all reality into a place called Battleworld, which he rules over as God Emperor. A few characters show up on Battleworld with their full memories intact, and they try to stop Doom and put things back to normal. One of them would be Thanos. Thanos, being the smug mad titan he is, decides to challenge Doom and refuses all of Doom's offers to work with him. So in one quick movement, Doom plunges his hand into Thanos' chest, grabs a hold of his spine, and turns his body to ash, leaving one of the most amazing comic panels ever. Number 8. Joker versus Alexander Luthor Jr. The Joker has a special something that just no other villain can really stand up to. What is it? Popularity. People love the Joker. This magic word, popularity, allows the Joker to beat out other villains that in the real world he would never be able to take down. It also allows him to save the day on occasion. In 2005's Infinite Crisis, Earth 3's Alexander Luthor Jr. attempts to remake the multiverse into one perfect reality. Perfect for him at least. By the end, well, he fails, but he finds himself cornered by Lex Luthor and Joker of New Earth, which is the mainstream continuity. Joker pretty ruthlessly scars Luthor Jr. with acid and then brings his life to a sudden end with a bang. And it was all because Alexander didn't include him in his scheme in the first place.
Number 7. Emma Frost versus Professor X. A lot of people think of Professor X as one of the strongest telepaths in the world, and he is, but he's not the only one. And although Emma Frost generally takes second place to the likes of her rival, colleague, and frenemy, Jean Grey, she can actually hold her own against Charles as it turns out, especially when she's smart enough to bait him into a trap, which, Emma, she's a very smart gal. This so happens when Charles attempts to take control of Cyclops' mind to see if there's anything of Nathaniel Essex, Mr. Sinister, left in there. At least that's what he claims anyways. Emma sets a trap in Scott's mind, with his permission of course, and when Charles attempts to probe further, he basically sets off that trap, unleashing Emma. Emma is then able to take full control, having been biding her time wisely by setting up blocks and failsafes so that she can basically call the shots and take over Charles's mind, as she attempts to search Xavier's mind for the same thing, any trace of Sinister, and also torment him somewhat while doing so, as Emma says to Charles, at the risk of sounding vulgar, I own you, which, yeah, she kinda did there for a second. Number 6. War Thor versus Mangog. Mangog in general is just completely nuts when it comes to his power levels. There are less that are actually able to stand up against him in comparison to the number that he's decimated at one point or another in the comics. I mean, yeah, only a few people can do that. But one of the heroes who got it the worst was probably War Thor. War Thor ended up being confronted by Mangog and being classified as a god, and he was absolutely decimated by him as a result. Issue number 7 701 of Mighty Thor showcases a brutal fight between the two when Mangog comes looking for the rest of the Asgardians and only finds War Thor. He even manages to completely destroy War Thor's hammer, which is super sad. Also then, of course, War Thor gets destroyed because no hammer, no War Thor. Number 5, Professor X versus Cyclops. I mean, this fight could easily be very one-sided, possibly going either way depending on who was writing and depending on where these characters were. But this one was really one-sided because it ended in death. Charles's death. Professor X died in the raging fire of Scott Summers' Phoenix. During Avengers vs. X-Men, Cyclops became one of the chosen Phoenix 5 after Iron Man, while attempting to destroy the Phoenix Force, split it into 5 instead. Cyclops becomes the last of the 5 left with the power though, and it becomes too much for him, corrupting him. Professor X, at this time a pretty hated dude, his revelations of all the awful stuff that he'd done in the past had come to light in recent years, attempts to talk his star pupil down. But Cyclops is not gonna hear it. Pissed at Xavier, and rightfully so to be honest, although this may have not been the best timing for him to do this, Psyche refuses to give in to Charles's control and simply straight up kills him in response. As he could do because he has the Phoenix Force. So I mean, I guess Charles was like, I can win this. I got like emotional things I can use. No, didn't work. Phoenix says no. Number 4, the Fallen One versus King Thanos. This fight is literally described as one-sided in the comic it appears in itself. This one comes to us from the alternate reality where Thanos wins in issue number 17 of the 2016 Thanos series. With this arc in the series, Thanos wins, being by Donny Cates. Thank you, Mr. Cates, for giving us Cosmic Ghost Rider in this one. So awesome. Here we see the Fallen One, who is now shiny Onyx, formerly Silver Surfer, deemed worthy enough to wield Mjolnir. He fights against King Thanos, who has killed almost all life in the cosmos. The Fallen One attempts to make him pay and initially has the upper hand, but in the end is beaten back, impaled, and torn asunder before being pulverized. And he also loses his buddy Hulk, so it's really sad.
Number 3, Batman Who Laughs versus Perpetua. Remember how I said Joker would be showing up again? Well, I kinda half lied. It's actually a Jokerized Batman, which is taking 2 of the arguably most popular DC hero and villain combos and mashing them together. Who can stand in the way of that? Also, to call this fight one-sided is a little debatable, but the Batman Who Laughs rose from being just a man to becoming a multiversal level threat very quickly after he gained access to the powers of Dr. Manhattan. This level of power allowed him to face and defeat Perpetua, one of, if not the, most powerful god in DC Comics, who is mother of the multiverse. He became the nightmare of one of the most powerful beings in all of DC Comics, sealing her away within fragments of the Source Wall. Number 2, Thanos versus Loki. Taking a break from comic books for a moment here, let's journey to the MCU. Loki is one of those characters who has elevated himself beyond the status of villain into a bit more of an anti-hero role, and the popularity of Tom Hiddleston's portrayal of the character is likely somewhat to blame for that. But popularity is not saving this character. In the opening of Avengers Infinity War, Thanos attacks the remaining Asgardians after the events of Ragnarok. Though they are Asgardians, he does seem to lay waste to them pretty easily. With Loki feigning allegiance to the Mad Titan, he makes a move against Grimace with a dagger only to be stopped, disarmed, and choked to death without the big bad even seeming to break a sweat, truly solidifying just how much of a threat Thanos is going to be. And in at number 1 is Thrag versus Dinosaurus. The Viltrumites from the Invincible comic series are a race of near invulnerable, incredibly strong, world-conquering aliens. But none among them stands as strong, as invulnerable as Grand Regent Thrag. Battle-hardened over thousands of years, only the most powerful characters can even hope to stand one-on-one against this powerhouse. David Anders, the villain known as Dinosaurus, is not one of those characters. While Dinosaurus is very strong, it's more his intelligence that is his greatest weapon. Dinosaurus allied himself with Invincible around issue 90 of the comics, and he would see Thrag attempt to take down Mark. Dinosaurus attacks Thrag, but his claws break on Thrag's skin. Thrag pummels the Dino Man, but he stops, distracted by an explosion, giving Dinosaurus the chance to chomp on his head, only for him to completely shatter his teeth, giving Thrag the chance to mock him and then break his jaw and leave him for dead. Luckily, Dinosaurus uses the opportunity to heal heal and escape with Mark.
Number 10, Iron Man vs. Squirrel Girl. I love how even during Doreen Green's very first appearance, she earned her title of being unbeatable. The very first time we meet Squirrel Girl, she's attempting to impress Iron Man in the hopes of earning a place at his side as his sidekick. The crazy part is she successfully ambushed him too. During a test flight for his new collision avoidance radar, that's really what he calls it, Doreen jumps onto his flying suit of armor, with him inside. Unable to see except through digital readouts that appear on a visor he's wearing, he is successfully surprised and thrown off course. When Iron Man attempts to remove his visor, Doreen uses her tail to block his vision still. In the end, they both crash to the ground, and Doreen introduces herself as Squirrel Girl, explaining that she simply wanted to prove herself to him in order to earn a place as his pard, short for partner. Sadly, he turns her down, even though she did prove that she's pretty awesome, I think, in that issue. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please head on down, give this video a thumbs up, also to let us know that you want to hear about some more one-sided fights. Number 9, Trinity vs. Harley Quinn. In one of what can only be described as one of the most wild fights ever that seems to be more about clout than powers or ability, Harley Quinn managed to defeat not one, not two, but all three heroes that we consider as belonging to DC's Holy Trinity. We're talking about Batman, Wonder Woman, and of course, Superman. When did this go down? During Heroes in Crisis. And how did Harley do it? By playing on the weaknesses of the heroes she was up against, and also utilizing Batman's utility belt, of course, which in and of itself generally is equipped with items needed to take down Bat's colleagues, because that's just how Batman rolls. It's like I always got kryptonite on me though, just in case, you never know. Number 8, Jubilee vs. Wolverine. Sometimes heroes get slapped by other heroes. Slapped. Such a great onomatopoeia. In the case of Jubilee, this is what happened when Wolverine came face to face with her. Of course, this wasn't just normal Jubes, this was Jubes under the influence of the Shadow King. She was possessed by him, in fact. Initially, Wolverine baited her in by promising that he wouldn't hurt her. Wolverine says, in fact, "I ain't gonna fight you, Jube. I couldn't." But it turns out that that's a lie. Although he doesn't badly injure Jubilee, knowing she is not in control of herself at this moment, he does knock her out with a slap. A slapped, if you will. Of course, this wasn't a direct fight between the two heroes, as Wolverine was only doing this to protect others from Jubilee, and likely also to protect Jubilee from herself at this moment in time.
Number 7, Joker vs. Simon. Yes, it is the Joker again, and guess what? He will appear later on as well. But I also hear you asking, Adam, who the heck is Simon? Exactly. That's my point. You think that the infamous Joker is going to fall to a guy named Simon, who most people haven't even heard of? Simon is a villain of the Teen Titans who has vast telekinesis and telepathic powers, and he is also the leader of the Fearsome Five. But in Salvation Run number 2, he is a member of the new Injustice League when a bunch of villains get exiled to an alien world. He attempts to convince his fellow supervillains that escape is impossible, and then proceeds to lay down plans for beginning a new civilization, only to be very abruptly interrupted by the Joker, who runs up and smashes Simon's brain in with a rock, repeatedly. Like I said, it was very abrupt. Number 6, General Zod versus Captain Boomerang. Never put a captain up against a general. It will not go well. In 2016's Suicide Squad, in literally the second issue, Task Force X are sent on a mission to Russia to retrieve or destroy an unknown device. Turns out that device is actually a portal to the Phantom Zone. Rather than leave it be, Captain Boomerang approaches the portal and is literally incinerated down to his ankles instantly by none other than General Zod, who was trapped inside only to break free. I doubt the Boomerang guy would have been able to help much in the squad's fight against Zod. Honestly, it's a miracle any of them actually survived at all. Number 5, Venom vs. Sandman. In Peter Parker's Spider-Man Volume 1, number 16, Sandman took to reforming the Sinister Six to go after Spider-Man. Now, one of those six was Eddie Brock, aka Venom. Being the villain he once was, Venom betrayed Sandman and the two got into a fight. Things quickly take a turn for the violent and chompy as Brock/Venom takes a huge chunk out of Sandman's body, causing Sandy to destabilize and break down, unable to stop himself from dissipating into a nearby storm drain. It's a pretty awful and pretty quick dispatching. Sandman does eventually return, but not as his old self, as the years spent in a kind of ghostly form left him in kind of tatters. Damn Venom. Number 4, Kite Man versus Riddler's Army. Okay, I am a sucker for an underdog. In Batman Volume 3, there was the war of jokes and riddles between the Joker and the Riddler, surprisingly, each fueled by their desire to take Batman's life. Now, each of these lunatics had gathered up a group of villains to their side, and they caused a hell of a lot of damage to Gotham and its people in their war. One person caught in the crossfire would be Charles Brown. Charles became a mole for Batman in Joker's army, and when Riddler found out, he brought Charles's son to an end. Charles became Kite Man and joined up with the Joker to get revenge. With Batman's help, Riddler takes down Joker's army one by one, leaving only Kite Man, who is forced to switch sides. In the final climactic battle though, Kite Man helps Batman and Riddler's army infiltrate the Joker's holdout, and when the battle is won and the villains turn on Batman, Kite Man had a backup plan that allowed him to almost single-handedly incapacitate 8 of the biggest bads on Batman's rogues gallery, helping Batman save the day. Never underestimate Kite Man. Hell yeah.
Number 3, Batman vs. Bane. Probably one of the most famous fights in comic book history. In this fight, Batman is brutalized by Bane. Bane ends up escaping Arkham and decides to see, how much havoc he can cause. When Batman ends up overwhelmed by the hordes of recently escaped criminals swarming the streets, Bane takes this as an opportunity to strike. Run down and exhausted after a night of non-stop fighting at this point, Batman is easily defeated by the villain, who famously breaks Batman's back over his knee, which we have that awesome page of, that awesome cover. Ouch. Bruce Wayne's Batman would return from this, but it would take him some time to heal. As you know, does happen if you break your back. Which you can heal from, it is possible, but it's not super easy to do. Number 2, Wolverine vs. Punisher. And maybe one of the most controversial of one-sided fights of all time, we see 2 heroes fight against one another, both who generally use less than heroic methods for getting things done. However, one of them still seems to be called a hero on the regular, that being Wolverine, while the other is often relegated to a different category, that of anti-hero, that being Punisher. It's kinda interesting. The two originally were kind of working toward the same goal here, but when they both differ on the method of how to deal with the situation, Wolverine ends up getting pretty humiliated in the ensuing fight, with Punisher even at one point steamrolling Logan. And that's after he does a whole bunch of other awful things to him, some of which I can't even say. That's how bad they are. Number 1, Joker vs. Superman. Can we even call this one a fight? It's kinda just straight up murder, really. Although maybe rightfully executed murder? I don't know. I don't think murder's ever really right. I guess it also depends on which side of this conflict you feel you're on, though I think by the end of Injustice, pretty much all of us are on Batman's side, right? No? Yes? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But back to the fight at hand. This one obviously went down in the alternate reality of Injustice. Here, Joker and Harley Quinn end up manipulating Superman into killing Lois by making him think he's fighting Doomsday. In doing so, they not only have killed Lois, but also her and Superman's future offspring, and all of Metropolis gets blown up too as well. Unsurprisingly, Superman does not take this very well, and when they get Joker in an interrogation room, Superman ends up cracking under the pressure of Joker's unrelenting grin, killing the Joker in cold blood. Because that's what would probably also happen if the Joker came up against Superman. Well, just saying, if Superman wanted to at any time, he could just pretty much end that.